In the bustling heart of Lagos, under the endless noise of honking cars and roadside chatter, lived a young man named Uche who believed that fortune could be summoned with just the right mixture of cunning and chance. He grew up in a cramped two-room apartment in Surulere, where the only constant was the struggle for daily survival. Many nights, he lay awake listening to the muffled sounds of neighbors quarreling over unpaid bills, wondering if this was all life had to offer, a cycle of debts, rent deadlines, and tattered dreams. But within him lived a flame of ambition, a restless spark that refused to settle for less. That spark led him into the world of internet scams, where hustlers flashed bundles of foreign currency and boasted about new cars. These so-called Yahoo boys bragged of easy money they snatched from unsuspecting victims overseas. The stories were tantalizing. A single online romance scam could yield thousands of dollars, enough to drag entire families out of poverty overnight. Uche, desperate to help his ailing mother and put his siblings through school, dove headlong into this murky domain. He spent hours hunched over a second-hand laptop, sending out carefully crafted messages to potential marks, weaving pitiful tales of distress or striking up phony romances in the hopes of quick cash. But success eluded him. Other fraudsters around him boasted of huge hits, those big money hauls that paid for luxurious apartments and trips to Dubai. Uche, despite countless late nights and elaborate lies, received only small trickles of cash. He grew increasingly anxious, burdened by overdue bills and the silent disappointment in his younger siblings' eyes whenever he came home empty-handed. It was during this low point that Uche first heard about Yahoo Plus, a whispered phrase among scammers referring to the dark arts, something that allegedly elevated ordinary cons into guaranteed gold mines. At first, the idea of using black magic to lure bigger victims sounded outlandish, the stuff of gossip. But as Uche felt time slipping away, he convinced himself that any avenue, no matter how sinister, was worth exploring if it meant delivering his family from poverty. It was around this time he was introduced to Barber Spinach, a gaunt, soft-spoken older man with piercing eyes. Rumors floated through the neighborhood that Barber Spinach had ties to powerful spirits, forces that could guarantee wealth if one was willing to pay the proper price. Uche, his heart pounding, approached the man with a mixture of hope and dread. In a smoke-filled room crammed with bizarre artifacts, animal skulls, blood-stained calabashes, and half-melted candles, Barber Spinach listened to Uche's desperation. Nodding slowly, he handed over small concoctions and instructed Uche to perform minor sacrifices, like offering live chickens under the full moon. Despite the unsettling rituals, Uche felt a renewed sense of possibility. For a while, he even believed he could taste the success that so many others bragged about. But weeks passed, and the promised torrent of money never arrived. Uche's frustration grew unbearable. Each night, he received only fleeting, modest bank alerts, not the life-changing sums he had been promised. One rainy evening, drenched and seething with desperation, he stormed back to Barber Spinach. His voice wavered between rage and pleading, demanding to know why the rituals weren't working. With an unsettling calm, the old man told him there was a final step, a bigger sacrifice that would unlock the wealth he so desperately sought. Human blood, Barber Spinach explained, was the only currency powerful enough to sway the spirits at this point. Uche's heart lurched. He wanted to recoil, to run out of that claustrophobic room, but the thought of returning to his cramped apartment and facing his family's unspoken disappointment stilled his feet. Human sacrifice was an unimaginable step, a line he never believed he could cross. And yet, the more he imagined the glitzy lifestyle he craved, the more his conscience twisted. Days slipped by, filled with restless sleep and swirling guilt. Eventually, he made a decision he could never undo. He would offer Ada, his loyal girlfriend, as the final piece in Barber Spinach's ritual. Ada was a kind-hearted woman who had stood by Uche through every disappointment, never once losing faith that he would find a legitimate path to success. She worked as a sales girl at a small boutique and often saved half her meager earnings to help Uche's mother with medication. Ignorant of her boyfriend's dark descent, she was simply relieved to see hints of renewed energy in him. When Uche asked her to accompany him to a business meeting in a remote part of town, she hesitated. His sudden optimism felt off, like a forced smile. Yet her love overcame her doubts. She wanted to believe that he had finally found a respectable solution to their financial woes. The drive out of Lagos Center was uneventful, the traffic slowly thinning until they reached a lonely stretch of road surrounded by tall grass and skeletal trees. The building they arrived at was a crumbling structure with broken windows and graffitied walls. Night had settled in, and clouds blotted out the moon, draping the scene in darkness. Ada's unease intensified, but Uche led her inside, insisting that the business partners were waiting. The moment they stepped through the threshold, she noticed the flickering candles and an overpowering stench of incense. Shadows danced on walls covered with eerie symbols. Before she could speak, two rugged men appeared from the darkness, grabbing her arms in a vice-like grip. In panic, she called Uche's name, pleading for an explanation. But he stood a few paces away, his face a mask of conflict. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. Barber Spinach, clad in a tattered robe, began to chant in a guttural voice. Drums pounded in the background, or perhaps it was Ada's own heart hammering in her ears. She fought against the men's hold, tears already streaming down her face, but they forced her to the ground before a crudely drawn circle. Suddenly, her screams tore through the still air, a desperate cry for someone, anyone, to help. Unknown to Uche, Ada had confided in her best friend, Kelechi, earlier that day, voicing suspicions about the strange business meeting. Alarmed, Kelechi had alerted a group of local vigilantes who'd been monitoring suspicious activities in the area. As fate would have it, they arrived just in time. In a whirlwind of shouts and flashlight beams, the vigilantes kicked down the rickety door, rushing into the smoke-laced darkness. Candles toppled, sending wax splattering across the floor. Barber Spinach lurched backward in surprise, his chanting silenced by the sudden invasion. Ada seized the chance to pull free, crawling away from her captors as the vigilantes wrestled them to the ground. Uche stood in stunned disbelief, caught between terror and relief, as the local men subdued Barber Spinach. Then they turned to Uche, demanding answers. Confronted with the reality of his actions, he sank to his knees, trembling, unable to justify the betrayal of the woman who had loved him unconditionally. Police sirens echoed in the distance, growing louder until flashing blue and red lights bathed the decrepit building in waves of color. In the aftermath, Ada was rushed to a nearby clinic for shock and minor injuries. She couldn't bring herself to look at Uche, who was shoved into a police van with Barber Spinach and the other assailants. News of the incident lit up social media, videos of the raid, photos of the blood-streaked candles, and interviews with the horrified vigilantes. The entire neighborhood buzzed with outrage and disbelief, unable to fathom that a familiar face like Uche's would stoop to such monstrous depths. From a small cell in a Lagos police station, he stared at the drab concrete walls, haunted by Ada's anguished screams. Every decision he had made, every scam, every ritual, unraveled before him, exposing a twisted devotion to greed that had swallowed his moral compass. As the days passed, he realized that all his dreams of luxury were built on illusions and desperation. The cost of that dream had been far too high, and there was no going back. Some said they saw Ada crying silently at the police station when she was called to give her statement, hands shaking as she recounted the betrayal that nearly claimed her life. Others heard that Kelechi couldn't stop blaming herself for not intervening sooner. In hushed voices, neighbors recalled how Uche once showed promise and kindness, but allowed ambition to twist into obsession. Yet all these whispers and rumors converged on one brutal lesson: no sum of money could justify the horrors of that night. Long after the scandal faded from the front pages, after the court hearings and prison sentences, people still brought up Uche's name whenever the topic of Yahoo Plus arose. They spoke of how a decent young man, cornered by hardship, had let darkness consume him. And they remembered Ada, the woman who survived the unimaginable and walked away, scarred but alive, reminding everyone that not all that glitters is gold, and that the pursuit of wealth without conscience can exact the most harrowing price of all.